We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on today's headlines. Typhoon Noru tore roofs from homes and caused power outages across central Vietnam, passed by Laos, with hundreds of thousands of people taking refuge after the storm earlier claimed lives in the Philippines. And Hurricane Ian plunged much of coastal southwest Florida into darkness as the monster storm brought catastrophic storm surges, wind and flooding that had officials readying a huge emergency response. Well, you can tell that the forces of nature are at work here. Take a look. Just hours before Hurricane Ian flooded Florida, water was sucked away from beaches along the coast. What was left was the ocean's sandy, barren bottom. The phenomenon is called a negative storm surge. And a Myanmar junta court sentenced the country's ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi to a further 3 years in prison while also jailing an Australian economist. First in our news, Typhoon Noru tore roofs from homes and also caused power outages across central Vietnam, with hundreds of thousands of people taking refuge after the storm claimed at least 10 lives in the Philippines. Let's take a look.
Rooms, so there was no power the entire night, and around 1 o'clock night, that is 1 a.m., there was because of the storm and thunder and the wind was so fast. Because of that, I think our room walls were, vibrating and shaking. So I was just in my prayers and I was so scared. Like we came for a vacation and, our vacation was spent in a storm. So that was like little terrifying. And it's a nice experience that, we have experienced this for the first time. So we got to see what is Vietnamese typhoon like.
In Da Nang, Vietnam's third largest city, high-rise buildings shook as the typhoon made landfall in the early hours of Wednesday. It brought winds of up to around 120 kilometers per hour, according to the national forecaster. Now, more than 300,000 people in Vietnam hunkered down in shelters overnight after experts predicted the storm would be one of the biggest to ever hit the country. In Laos, meanwhile, authorities ordered a close watch on dams and urged people to seek shelter for themselves and for livestock. Noru is then expected to move over Thailand's northeastern Ubon Ratchathani province today, gradually weakening into a tropical depression. Thai authorities warned of heavy rain and possible flash flooding, saying people living in high-risk areas should prepare to evacuate their homes. In Cambodia, meanwhile, officials are warning residents in low-lying areas already hit by heavy rains in recent days to be alert to the danger of flash floods. By Wednesday evening, meanwhile, it weakened to a tropical storm as it crossed into southern Laos, but forecasters in Vietnam are still warning of landslides and serious flooding in the typhoon's wake. And now, a catastrophic direct hit. Hurricane Ian slamming into Florida's Gulf Coast as a devastating Category 4 storm. Take a look. The monster storm making landfall on the barrier island of Cayo Costa west of the city of Fort Myers. The National Hurricane Center said Ian was packing maximum sustained winds of 155 miles per hour when it landed. The sheer force of those winds peeling off roofs and snapping trees in half. The slow-moving system trapping more than 20 inches of rain, cities up and down Gulf Coast underwater. Ian leaving a treacherous storm surge in its wake. The Gulf of Mexico pouring into Naples, flooding streets, and waves crashing into some homes. The water there at the highest level in recorded history. The water so high it left residents stranded in their homes. Now, it later weakened slightly to a Category 3 hurricane with winds of 105 miles per hour while still battering Florida with catastrophic storm surge, winds, and flooding. And here's Melissa Potas for more updates in her neck of the woods. Melissa.
In St. Petersburg, Florida, earlier today, it looked deceptively like a heavy rainstorm. But that changed quickly as Ian moved inland, packing sustained winds of 240 kilometers an hour. In the city of Fort Myers, severe coastal flooding has left some neighborhoods looking like lakes. Power outages have left nearly 2 million customers without electricity. Ian is expected to affect millions more as it barrels across the state and then into Georgia and South Carolina.
We are getting reports, but it's going to take a little bit more time to know exactly in terms of structural damage, but we are getting some reports of structural damage in both Lee and Charlotte counties, but I would say overwhelmingly it's been that surge that has been the biggest issue and the flooding that has resulted as a result of that. In some areas, we think it's hit 12 feet. Now, it is our meteorologists' view that the storm surge has likely peaked and will likely, be less in the coming hours than it has been up to this point. But we know that this has been a big storm and it's done a lot of damage as it is. It is going to continue to move through the state of Florida. You're going to see hurricane-force winds in places in central Florida, perhaps. It's clearly a very strong tropical storm all the way until it exits the Florida Peninsula in the Atlantic Ocean. We have over 1.1 million reported power outages. Now, there are crews that are still working outside of Southwest Florida, but just understand that number is going to grow. You're going to see more power outages as this storm moves through the center part of our state and before it exits into the Atlantic coast.
Offshore, the U.S. Border Patrol says 20 migrants are missing after their boat sank. 4 Cubans who survived managed to swim to shore. 3 others were rescued by the Coast Guard. Forecasters are warning Ian is a once-in-a-generation calamity that could create a life-threatening situation. The storm is expected to emerge in the Atlantic Ocean late Thursday. Melissa Potas, Orlando, Florida, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Well, you can just tell that the forces of nature are at work here. Take a look. Just hours before Hurricane Ian flooded Florida, water was sucked away from beaches along the coast, and what was left was the ocean's sandy, barren bottom. The phenomenon is called a negative storm surge or reverse storm surge, also known as a blowout tide. Now, this happens when offshore hurricane winds push water from the coast, leaving beaches barren. Now, blowout tides are the opposite of storm surges, which fiercely pushes water over the shore. A hurricane's winds blow counterclockwise, and with Ian passing south of Tampa Bay, winds to the north of the storm are blowing in from the east, pushing water away from the shoreline, according to Christopher Slocum, a scientist with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Now, people tend to let their guard down when they see the water receding, thinking that their risk is lower. Now, it can give a false sense of security, but the water, remember now, the water can rush back in so quickly when the winds change direction. Many residents may be tempted to stroll across an empty sand bed and pick up shells from what used to be an ocean, but experts are warning this is very dangerous. If the wind were to abruptly cease or shift, the water could return to Tampa Bay in force, surging above normal high water levels. Carrie A. Emanuel, a meteorologist and hurricane expert at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, warned. In tonight's other news, a Myanmar beauty queen who spoke against the military coup in her homeland landed in Canada, where she has been granted asylum after being stranded at an airport in Thailand for nearly a week. Thao Nandar Ong, better known by her professional moniker Han Lei, has arrived safely in Toronto, according to Tin Mong Tu of the Burmese Canadian Action Network. The beauty queen had been held at Bangkok's main international airport since last Thursday after arriving on a flight from Vietnam over what Thai immigration officials said was a problem with her passport. She'd been living in Thailand since fleeing Myanmar last year. In a post on her verified Facebook page, Han Lei said she feared the Myanmar police would come and get her at the airport and reach out to the UN Refugee Agency. Now, Human Rights Watch's Phil Robertson accused Myanmar's rulers of using passports as a weapon against their own people and of having laid a trap to try to force Han Lei to return to Myanmar, where she would have faced immediate arrest, likely abuse in detention and imprisonment. He called it a deliberate political act by the junta to make her stateless. Han Lei made headlines in March 2021 when she urged the world to save the people of Myanmar from the military, which had seized power a month earlier. While in Bangkok, competing in the Miss Grand International Contest, the former psychology student spoke out against the coup. And a Myanmar junta court sentenced the country's ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi to a further 3 years in prison today, while also jailing an Australian economist. Detained since the putsch last year, Suu Kyi has already been convicted of corruption and a clutch of other charges by a closed court. She and Sean Turnell received a 3-year sentence under the State Secrets Act on Thursday. Both had been detained since the coup in February last year, in which the military ousted Suu Kyi's government, for which Turnell was an advisor. The source added that a separate case against Turnell under the country's Immigration Act was ongoing. His arrest last year prompted outrage, with Australian diplomats lobbying Myanmar's regional neighbors to assist with the case. The 76-year-old was in the middle of a phone interview with the BBC when he was detained after the 2021 coup. In a related news, Facebook should pay reparations to the hundreds of thousands of Rohingyas forced from their homes in Myanmar in a campaign exacerbated by rampant online hate speech, according to Amnesty International in a report. Take a look.
Is that the issues that the Rohingya faced 5 years ago remain unresolved. They are yet to receive justice, and they're still pursuing Facebook for a remedy. And we've conducted an in-depth investigation into the role played by Facebook in those harms. And they show that Facebook has a responsibility under international human rights standards to pay reparations to that community. So this report is showing that Facebook played a role in the atrocities that this community suffered. And they also have a responsibility to try and remediate these harms, because this remains an ongoing live human rights situation which these individuals are suffering from. And Facebook needs to pay up and do their duty under international human rights law and standards. Its core technologies, the algorithms that power the Facebook platform, including, for example, the recommendation feature, the newsfeed feature, new evidence coming from internal Facebook documents shows that these are not neutral technologies. In fact, they prioritize and promote and amplify the most harmful types of content. And this investigation shows that that included incitement to violence and hatred against the Rohingya. In one such example where Facebook sought to support a civil society-led initiative called Flower Speech, where individuals could post stickers of a flower on instances of hate speech to show their opposition to the spread of harmful content. In fact, activists told Amnesty that this was in fact triggering the algorithms to spread the content even further. So Facebook's minimal attempts to address the spread of harmful content may have even had the opposite effect and actually increased the distribution of hate speech. And we're saying not only does Facebook owe a remedy to the communities that it has harmed, we're also calling on governments to effectively rein in companies like Facebook that are fueling human rights harms across the world with these destructive business models.
Now to the world economy, where World Bank President David Malpass says it may take years for global energy production to diversify away from Russia, prolonging risk of stagflation. And here's more. Let's listen in.
As we gather in this prestigious institution, a tough reality confronts the global economy, and especially the developing world. A series of harsh events and unprecedented macroeconomic policies are combining to throw development into crisis. This has consequences for all of us due to the interlinked nature of the global economy and civilizations around the world. The report shows that poverty had been steadily declining through the 1990s and 2000s. Progress had slowed by 2015, and extreme poverty rose by roughly 70 million when the pandemic hit. The developing world is facing an extremely challenging near-term outlook shaped by sharply higher food, fertilizer, and energy prices, rising interest rates and credit spreads, currency depreciation, and capital outflows. Under current policies, global energy production may take years to diversify away from Russia, prolonging the stagflation risk. The human consequence of these overlapping crises is catastrophic. Facing these overlapping crises, a pressing danger for the developing world is that the sharp slowdown in global growth deepens into global recession, as the World Bank discussed in a September report. Global GDP per capita in 2021 barely exceeded its pre-pandemic level, but many developing countries have not reached their pre-pandemic per capita income levels.
Go Negosyo founder Jose Maria Joey Concepcion III, part of the Marcos administration's Private Sector Advisory Council, said that the Philippines should open up its economy as much as possible, even with a slight increase in COVID cases in the country. Here's why.
We just have to live with with COVID around us. It will continue to be there. It will go. Cases will go up and cases will go down. But what's important is that we have to focus on getting the economy moving kasi maraming talagang tinamaan sa unang phase ng pandemic. Kung tatamaan ulit sila dito sa itong nangyayari ngayon, and then mahirapan silang umutang ulit sa mga bangko. Ang mga bangko ay hindi magpapautang sa mga umutang kasi nalugi ulit sila. So they cannot lose money in this next quarter. Itong October, November, December, talagang critical quarter to para sa mga micro, small, and medium enterprise. No? Dito dapat kumita ang mga MSMEs natin para at least mabayaran nila ang mga utang nila. So, and they can cross over to 2023. Yan ang importante. So we have to maintain that level, the wall of immunity. Siyempre, nakita ay yung Omicron, mild. Wala problema, kayang-kaya ko yan. Pero yung attitude na yan, delikado yan kasi kung tumama sa kanila at medyo immunity was really weak, baka malubang ang mangyari sila, ma-hospital sila. So the problem we will have is that when the hospitals become really full, then of course, then it will be a different story. So we should continue to encourage boost. Hopefully, we can get the Paxlovid in the country in large quantities para kung yung mga those who are seniors and they need antiviral medicine, we have it on stock. No? And I hope Zwellig is able to bring that in soon. No? So let's prepare. I mean, the fourth quarter is the last quarter. This is the chance for MS to really rebound. And let's continue with this momentum. No?
In other business news, Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer Zhejiang Leap Motor Technology suffered Hong Kong's worst trading debut so far this year, plunging more than 40% today this morning. Leap Motor raised around $800 million earlier this month with an initial public offering or IPO that saw its shares sold for 48 Hong Kong dollars. But on its first day of trading today, it tumbled as much as 41.6% to 28.05 Hong Kong dollars. The steepest first-day decline by a listing larger than $250 million in Hong Kong this year, according to Bloomberg News. Hong Kong used to be a bonanza location for Chinese IPOs, with investors frequently seeing handsome spikes on the first day of trading. But ongoing concerns about the state of China's economy under strict zero-COVID controls, combined with global market anxiety as the Fed Reserve turns increasingly hawkish to control spiraling inflation, has hit Hong Kong's already troubled stock market. And finally, in our news, Brunei has opened its 26.3-kilometer Sultan Haji Omar or Ali Saifuddin Bridge or SHOAS to foreign vehicles, except for those about 3,500 kilograms. According to a statement by the Bridges Management Committee, jointly chaired by Brunei's Ministry of Transport and Info Communications and Ministry of Development, the SHOAS is open to all Brunei registered vehicles. The committee pointed out that for private and commercial foreign in Class 2 and 5 weighing over 3,500 kilograms aren't allowed to use the bridge except for those comparable to Brunei vehicle classes 1, 3, 4, 6, and 12. Now, foreign vehicles weighing over 3,500 kilograms are advised to use the ASEAN Highway 150. The committee also advised road users to obey the 100 km per hour speed limit for normal vehicles and 80 km per hour for commercial vehicles on the bridge. The opening of SHOAS has long been awaited by Sarawakian and Sabahan, looking forward for shorter traveling distance between the two states via Brunei. And as my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. Thank you for joining us. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.